Hello, artists. Hello, my art friends. How are you doing today? I'm doing great. It is summertime here. It is hot, but it is beautiful. The flowers are blooming, and it is finally not cold here in Denver. So, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Kelly Folsom, and I am a full-time artist. I am also a very heart-led teacher and coach and mentor for artists in all ways, both teaching technique as well as mentoring and coaching artists on their own personal art career journey and helping with business and all things related to this art life. And that's what this podcast is all about, right? Is all things art life, everything that we deal with as artists along the way on the journey. And so my hope with this podcast, of course, is just to be able to help you, to be able to share with you, for us to both learn from each other. And also to hopefully let you know that you are not alone. If you are experiencing or going through any of these issues that I share on this podcast, and it always helps to know that we're not alone, right? Because sometimes whenever we think that we're the only ones going through it, we make it mean that there's something wrong with us. Or that nobody else is experiencing this and somehow we are weak or weak-minded or any of that stuff, and it's just simply not true. So I believe that when you have the right people in your life that have your back, that believe in you, that support you, and that you can share together with in a community of artists like that, the more healthy and the more productive and more successful you're going to be as an artist. So you are listening to episode number 3. Number 3 is one of my favorite numbers, and it shows up in art so much, the thirds. Okay, so episode number 3, here's what we're going to be talking about today. Speaking of having the right people in your community, in your corner, the right people having your back. Today we are talking about critics. Yay! Woohoo! So excited to talk about critics. But I always say it's really funny to me that nobody cares about your art until you actually make it. And then all of a sudden everybody has an opinion, right? From your Uncle Joe to your sister Sue to if you're plein air painting outside and somebody just drives by or walks by, all of a sudden everybody has an opinion on your art, and everybody is a critic oftentimes, right? And everybody seems to know how to make art, and they tell you what you should fix and what doesn't look right and all that fun, good stuff, which I could share so many funny stories on that topic. Oh my goodness gracious. I'm sure you have your own experiences with this and your own stories. So I love this quote by Will Smith. And he says, "Stop letting people who do so little for you control so much of your mind, feelings, and emotions." Ain't that the truth, y'all? And so I love that quote. And I love that attitude about critics, right? But there's one critic that I really want to focus on today, because this is the critic that does the most damage to us as artists. And it's the critic that holds us back the most. And that critic is you. It is your inner critic as an artist. And so while we could focus on, the outside critics or other people and what they have to say about our art and how that affects us, and that is, of course, something that we have to deal with as artists as well. But the biggest critic I have found that every single one of us artists deal with, some of us more than others, is the inner critic. I teach a course called Finding Your Artistic Voice. And the very first thing that we deal with in that course is the inner critic, because you cannot hear your own artistic voice, your true voice, if your inner critic voice is just raging and criticizing all the time. Okay, so it's my firm belief that it's really this inner critic, y'all. What is that quote? Like, we have met the enemy and he is us. That is so true. So, the inner critic, it sounds like statements like, oh, of course, this painting didn't work out. Gosh, why did I do that? I just made, that looks awful. I suck. This looks like crap. I'm never going to be a great artist. Who do I think I'm fooling? Who do I think I'm kidding? Like, I'm not getting anywhere. The list can go on and on and on. And obviously, whenever we say these things, sometimes the inner critic is so strong that it's now the outer critic, right? Sometimes the inner critic is so prominent in our thoughts that then it becomes the outer critic, and sometimes we even start saying the stuff out loud, and sometimes not even just to ourselves, which is really horrible. Anytime that I speak to an artist, and I was one of these artists, you guys, my very first year of art school, I would trash my artwork. I would cut it down so hard before anybody else could cut it down. And I come by this naturally. I have a mother and a grandmother that both have very strong inner critics, have very strong perfectionist tendencies. And so just a minor example might be like my grandma, doing something, cooking in the kitchen and saying, oh gosh, why did you do that? That was so dumb. Like saying that she's dumb, just because she forgot something or she forgot to put an ingredient in, something like incredibly human. We are human, by the way. I have to remind myself and remind you guys as well. We are just human, and it's wonderful. And most of the time we are absolutely magnificent, and most of the time everything goes well, but we are human and we make mistakes and we forget things and we mess things up sometimes. And that's just called being human, and it's a beautiful part of life. So, this is the main critic that you have to watch out for, is the inner critic. And one of the exercises that I give artists in the Finding Your Artistic Voice course is for them to list out every single critical thought that they have about themselves as artists or their artwork. Okay, and sometimes this can feel kind of scary because it's like, well, let's not unleash it, Kelly. My goodness, open up those floodgates and the thoughts are just going to keep rolling out. But I promise you, this is really a positive experience. Number one, because it does, when you get it on paper, it does get it out in the open, and it does help you to realize how much your inner critic has really taken over, right? Like for many of us, we have now allowed our inner critic to be in the driver's seat. Like it is the pilot of the plane, it is the driver of the car, and meanwhile our art self is in the back seat going, but wait, I wanted to try that, but wait, I wanted to do this painting. But your inner critic is like, nope, sorry darling, that we're not going down that road again. Remember last time we went down that road? Remember how bad it was? You screwed that painting up. And so sometimes whenever we don't really call out the inner critic and bring it to the forefront, put all the cards of the inner critic on the table, then what can end up happening is it's just not a conscious thing that you're doing, right? I'm going to put my tea over here, excuse me. because I keep hitting it. Okay, so the first thing is really to call out the inner critic. Let the inner critic be heard. Just sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and, hey, inner critic, like, let me have it. Like, let's go. Tell me everything you got to say about me as an artist and about my art. And write them all down. Get it all out on a sheet of paper. Because really this starts to automatically take power away from your inner critic, right? Just by acknowledging, and sometimes it's like actually funny whenever you start reading some of these statements. It could be very heartbreaking and sad to read them, and then sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I just said that out loud, or I just thought that, or I just wrote that down. Geez, wow. Like, that's a little extra. That's a little much, right? So just doing that step, will automatically disarm the inner critic. It's really a powerful exercise to do. And it gets it out in the open and makes you conscious of what you're actually thinking. Because I think, so much of the time we're having these thoughts and these conversations in our head, and they're just thoughts, it's just mental chatter. And sometimes we're just making it mean too much. We're listening to those thoughts too much. We're believing those thoughts too much. And the nature of our human brain is really just to continue to prove itself right. So if you think a thought like, I suck at painting, I'll never get good at this, then your brain wants to continue to make that thought truth, to prove the thought right. This is just kind of like the autopilot version of our brain. So first, you have to recognize, we all have to recognize, like, we all can have these thoughts from time to time. It doesn't mean that we have to believe them. It doesn't mean that they are true, right? So the thing is to get them out on the table, and then what I like to do is then look for all the ways that it's not right. Of course, a big thing to notice is like whenever we use words like never, always. Oh, I never show up to paint. Oh, I always mess up the painting, or, just words like that. Those are how you know, because we never or always do anything, right? Again, we're human. We can be incredibly consistent as human beings, but there is always a small amount of inconsistency, right? So we never always are this way, or we're it's just not the case. It's not true. So once you have your list of your inner critic statements, the next thing that I like to have the artist who take this course do is, after you purge all of that out, then I have the artist go through one by one. And obviously, this can take a good amount of time to do. So you want to make sure that you do set aside some time, that you do get a pen and paper, and that you really do the work, that you show up and do the work. So the next step is going one by one. And let's say if one of your statements is, I'm not good at painting, or I'm not getting better fast enough. Let's use that one. I'm not getting better fast enough at my art, right? And so then what I would ask you and me to do is to look at that statement, get still. I am not getting better fast enough at art. Get still with that and ask yourself, what is really the truth here? What is more true than that, right? So what might be more true is I am making progress as an artist. Okay? It's not like you're doing, I call these truth turnaround statements, and it's not like you're doing like, a total, it has to be believable. That's the thing. It has to feel true to you. So it might not feel true to you to say, what am I talking about? I'm getting better so fast. Look at me. I am supersonic, improving. Okay? That may not feel like it has 1 ounce of truth to it to you. But I guarantee you that there is another truthful statement that is more true than I'm not getting better fast enough at my art. Right? So a more truthful statement may be something that's actually just more neutral. That's actually just more like, you know what? I have seen progress in my art. I am making progress. So sometimes I think as human beings, we tend to kind of fluctuate between these two sides. Is really like fantasy side where we're like, I'm the king of the world, as an artist. And that's kind of our ideal. That's really how we wish everything were to be because it's the most pleasurable thing, right? Like it's the most pleasurable experience. So we tend to fluctuate either from the fantasy side of things, which is all about us getting everything that we want and having immense pleasure and no pain whatsoever because the brain hates pain, right? And then the other side, which is, complete self-deprecation, 100% self-doubt. This is never going to happen. We can never do it. And it's just total self-sabotage. Your inner critic is totally in control. This is so damaging. Of course, if these are the thoughts that you are repeating to yourself day in and day out, and you're actually just letting them run on autopilot and then they become outer critic and you start saying them to other people, this is so damaging. How can you possibly move forward, in this art journey, on your art career, in your art life with that kind of mentality? It's not possible, to do. So, and again, you can't, because the more that you say those things, think those things, believe those things, the more the brain is going to listen to you, and the more the brain is going to want to say, yeah, you know what, you're right. We should just quit. What were we thinking? We're not good enough to do this. I'm not good enough to do this. So, you just need to give it up already. So the more that you let those thoughts run your life, obviously, you're going to end up quitting. Okay. And I don't want that for you guys. I know for me, my first year of art school, this really came to a head. So this really, really came to a head towards the end of the first year of art school. I'll just use myself as an example, that I really was impatient and I really was comparing myself all the time to everybody else, how good they were, how not good I was. And what ended up happening by end of year 1 is I actually started contemplating, maybe this isn't the right path for me. Maybe I'm not supposed to be an artist. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should try something else, or do something else. Maybe I was just totally off on this, and so because I was caught up so much in self-criticism and also comparing myself to everybody else, I really had disconnected from the reason why I wanted to do this to begin with. I wanted to learn how to paint. I wanted to learn how to draw. That was my original, reason for doing all of this. But by the end of my first year of art school, I was so filled with self-doubt because I had made, my inner critic was in the driver's seat all the time. And I had made this inner criticism such a habit, day in, day out, that I almost totally sabotaged my artistic future. So I actually started contemplating, giving up, stopping, maybe going and getting a degree in something else. And I even started contemplating, well, at least I'm getting a degree. So even if I'm not that good as an artist and I can't make it, making art, well, maybe I could at least, maybe I could get a minor in art history, or maybe I can work at an art museum or at an art gallery and just be involved with art because I really do love it. I really do love art, so I found myself negotiating internally with these things, sort of fluctuating between just giving up, quitting altogether. But for me, the problem with that, when I did contemplate quitting altogether, I realized it took me, 10 years just to decide on this, because I tried other things and they didn't work. They weren't the right fit for me, So I knew that I still internally really knew that this was the right path for me. But I had, so convinced myself that I wasn't good enough, or that I would never be good enough, that I almost quit, either literally quit and went and did something else, or internally sold myself short, internally kind of make my dream a little smaller, right? And I think so often we do that. We tend to play small just because we've given in to that inner critic. The inner critic has totally sabotaged us, and we are now riddled with self-doubt. So now we end up getting to this place where we're like, oh, we'll just play it small. I'll just do it as a hobby, I'll just do it for fun, or maybe I can just teach kids, not that there's anything wrong with teaching kids if that is truly your dream. But I'm just speaking for me personally. I started sort of an inner negotiating my dream down, in size. And that's how you really know that your inner critic is really in control. And so it's super important. It's critical. It's critical that you rein in that inner critic and that you really challenge the things that the inner critic is saying, and that you really look at it and you say, is that really true? Come on, get real. Is it really true? Is that statement that I'm saying to myself really true, that I am not good enough as an artist? And so again, what would the truth turnaround be for that? What would be a statement that's actually more true than let's say I'm not a good artist? Maybe the truth turnaround for that is I am an artist because I'm making art and I love making art. Again, it needs to be a statement that feels true, because, affirmations really, in my opinion, don't work. Affirmations is just like you're saying something that you don't believe, and so the brain doesn't believe it, so those affirmations are never going to work. So you have to at least first get to a place of neutrality, to a truer statement that's more neutral in emotion, right? That isn't on the fantasy side, where it's unbelievable and isn't totally self-deprecating, because if all you're doing is thinking and believing those things, then, that's all you're going to get, right? So you have to at least get to a place that is more neutral in emotion in your thinking, and it feels like a true statement. So they're not affirmations in the sense of I am a fabulous artist and everybody loves my artwork. Now, I believe that 100% now, 13 years later. But if I would have said that to myself in year one, I would have not believed it. So it would have done me no good whatsoever. Whereas a statement back then, year one or year two, that I would have believed would have been this is my dream to be an artist, and I love making art, and I know that people will eventually like my art, and I know that I will get better as an artist. I am getting better as an artist. That would have been a statement that I could have believed, because if I would have pulled out my paintings from the first art class ever to a year later, and actually we did this, Monty, my boyfriend, and I, we did this because I was having a total meltdown at the end of year one, and what kept referring to my artwork as fecal matter, as Monty would say. And sometimes you need somebody like that to call you on your shit, right? To call you on the fact that you are not believing in yourself and that your inner critic is out of control. So we did that at the end of my year one. Monty said, bring over every painting you've done since the beginning of the year. And we laid out every painting from painting one to whatever the newest painting was by the end of that second semester of art school. So when I could see all of those paintings together, I could see truthfully how much I had progressed. The proof was right there in front of me. And so the inner critic could not be in control, or at least could not make that statement anymore that I was not progressing. So you really have to stop this habit of the inner critic, and sometimes it takes doing things like that to show your brain the proof that it's not true, right? Sometimes just the thinking doesn't do it. So sometimes doing, in fact, it's always best to get out of your head and get something physical, something on paper, or, even writing about, how you've progressed from the beginning to now is a good exercise to do. But I think physically seeing it, pulling out your very first artwork to the artwork that you're doing now, to physically see how you've progressed is so powerful for proving to your brain that that inner critic statement is not true. Excuse me. So, artist, this is what I want for you. I want you to reach your full artistic potential, okay? And we cannot do that with the inner critic in the driver's seat. This is not good suffering. This is bad suffering, okay? So you're already suffering, because the inner critic is in the driver's seat. So you need to, do the work, which is hard, but do the work to prove to your brain and the inner critic that you are making progress and that you are good enough to do this, okay, so that you can reach your full potential. Because if you do not, the inner critic, I think of it as like a snowball effect. It's like it just keeps building and building and building. It's never going to get any better, just thinking more negative thoughts about yourself and your artwork is never going to create something good. No good is ever going to come from it, right? Whereas if you can prove to your brain and to the inner critic that those statements are not true, or at least just begin to break the habit of thinking it as much, or especially saying it out loud, for example, if somebody gives you a compliment, just don't tear yourself down. Just try that for a change, right? Like the immediate reaction, depending on where you are with this, may be to want to just, oh no, well, I messed that up, and give us like a whole list of what's wrong with your artwork, right? That may be the immediate reaction that you may want to go to. So even just like not doing that, which is so hard, right? Once you've already developed that inner critic habit, it is so hard to stop yourself from doing that. So it's going to take a lot of self-control, a lot of discipline, a lot of willpower, but you have to do it. This is a life or death situation when it comes to being an artist. You just simply cannot go through your art life with the inner critic totally in control and in the driver's seat. And here's the other thing, it's nobody else's responsibility but yours to do that. Okay, you have to take 100% responsibility for your own art life, your own path, and how you are engaging with it, how you are showing up. Thoughts, your thoughts, your emotions, whether or not you're showing up disciplined enough to paint with a work ethic like we talked about in the last podcast. Everything is on you. And so don't expect other people to always build you up. Please don't use the inner critic and tearing yourself down as a way to get other people to build you up. Listen, they're going to do it for a while, but then they're going to get sick of doing it for you. They're going to get tired of doing it for you. You know why? Because it never works. It never fixes anything. Oh no, oh my gosh, no, I love this painting. No, you did so good. But you know what they get back in return every time they do that? You tearing yourself down if the inner critic is, out of control. So it's not rewarding to them to even try to build you up because you're not going to listen. You're not going to believe them. So eventually they're going to stop trying to build you up as well. They're going to get tired of doing it. So this is your job. As an artist, it is your job to manage your emotions and your mind and your work ethic. It is nobody else's job but yours, right? And so with that being said, don't be super hard on yourself. Just start working on it. Like if you are in inner critic quicksand, just start working on it today. Start challenging those thoughts. I challenge you to do it. I want you to do it, like I said, because I want you to reach your maximum full potential as an artist. Okay, artists, thank you so much for being here. Please leave me your thoughts on this topic of the inner critic and leave me a review. Follow the podcast if you like this. Also, if you like things that I'm sharing here, you can also go to artlifewithkelly.com, Kelli, and check out all of the offerings that I have for you there in terms of teaching and mentoring and coaching on top of this awesome podcast. And until I see you next time, I'm wishing you well and much love and happy painting. Bye.